There's something quietly unnerving about standing in the middle of your kitchen, frozen, unsure why you walked in there in the first place. A moment ago, your purpose felt clear. Now, it slips through your fingers like fine sand. Maybe it was the keys, or a phone call, or was it your glasses again? This happens more than you'd like to admit. And each time it does, a small flicker of fear sparks inside. Is this how it begins? The slow unraveling? The fading of memories, names, stories, the little threads that weave your life into something meaningful? You're not alone. Across the world, countless people in their 70s quietly wrestle with the same anxiety. The worry that their mind, once so quick and clear, is now dulled by time. That the faces of loved ones, important dates, and even the taste of yesterday's dinner might be slipping into the mist. But here's something most people don't know: memory loss isn't always inevitable. In fact, in many cases, it can be slowed, even reversed, by something deceptively simple. Not with a miracle drug. Not with high-tech gadgets. Not with expensive therapy. But with a daily act so ordinary, so easily overlooked, it feels almost laughable. Yet, neuroscientists, geriatric experts, and even everyday people who've tried it are starting to agree. This one habit can sharpen the aging mind, restore mental clarity, and bring back the richness of thought. What is this habit? You'll find out soon. But first, let's look at why the memory begins to fade. And how, with a shift as small as 10 minutes a day, you might just reclaim what you thought was lost for good. This is not about becoming younger. This is about becoming sharper. And it begins not with a pill, but with a pen. The brain, that miraculous 3-pound universe inside our skulls, has carried us through decades of decisions, emotions, and memories. It has seen births, heartbreaks, sunrises, and quiet Sunday mornings. And yet, as we enter our 70s, it begins to change in ways that feel unfamiliar, even unfair. It starts subtly. A misplaced word. A forgotten appointment. A face that feels recognizable, but unnamed. These aren't just mental slips, they're reminders. Gentle nudges that the brain, like any other organ, responds to time. Scientifically, the aging brain goes through measurable changes. The volume of the brain begins to shrink, particularly in areas responsible for learning and memory. Blood flow slows. Neural connections, those invisible highways that carried our thoughts for so long, begin to thin. It's not disease. It's biology. A natural, expected process that begins in midlife and becomes more noticeable as we age. But here's the twist: while these physical changes are real, they don't mean the end of mental clarity. Aging does not automatically equal cognitive decline. In fact, research has consistently shown that many older adults retain, and even improve, certain mental abilities like vocabulary, emotional regulation, and decision-making. What deteriorates most is what scientists call fluid intelligence, the ability to think quickly, solve problems, and form new memories. But crystallized intelligence, or the knowledge gained from a lifetime of experience, often grows stronger with age. The mind, in other words, doesn't wither, it transforms. However, like a garden left untended, the brain needs stimulation. Without daily challenges, without new input, it defaults into survival mode, conserving energy, minimizing effort, and gradually dimming. Think of it like a muscle. Left unused, it shrinks. But exercised, even gently, it can regain strength and resilience. And that's where the opportunity lies. For decades, society has painted a grim picture of cognitive aging, one of inevitability and decline. But science now offers a more hopeful truth. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to adapt, rewire, and grow, never disappears. Even in your 70s and beyond, your brain retains the capacity to create new neural pathways. This means that memory, focus, and mental agility are not permanently lost. They are simply dormant, waiting for the right kind of spark. And what's most remarkable is this: that spark doesn't have to be complex. It doesn't require endless puzzles, complicated apps, or medical treatments. It can come from a single consistent act performed daily, that engages the mind with intention. So before we explore that one daily trick that has transformed lives across age groups, let us first recognize this. Your brain is not broken. It is not too late. And the journey back to mental sharpness begins not with fear, but with understanding. If the brain is a garden, many people unknowingly plant weeds in it each day. Small, harmless-looking habits, done out of comfort, routine, or even fatigue, slowly crowd out the mental clarity we seek. The truth is, our modern lifestyle, even in retirement, is filled with quiet enemies of memory. The first mistake is passivity. After decades of work, it's natural to long for peace, for rest, for stillness. But there's a difference between relaxation and mental stagnation. Hours in front of a television, especially watching the same kinds of programs, day after day, do little to engage the brain. The content flows to you, not through you. The mind, once curious and alive, becomes a silent observer, drifting. Passive activities aren't evil, but when they dominate your daily rhythm, they send the brain a dangerous message. Nothing new is coming. No effort required. And over time, the brain listens. It slows its curiosity. It shortens attention. It learns not to try. The second mistake is routine without variation. Routines provide structure. They're comforting. But without occasional disruption, even small ones, they can dull the brain's hunger for novelty. Driving the same route, eating the same breakfast, reading the same kind of newspaper in the same chair, at the same time, every day, these things might feel safe, but they rarely challenge the mind. When was the last time you took a different path to the market? Or listened to music you didn't recognize? Or struck up a conversation with someone new? The brain thrives on variation. It wakes up when patterns are broken, even slightly. The third mistake is nutritional neglect. The brain is a hungry organ. Despite being only about 2% of our body weight, it consumes around 20% of our energy. And yet, many seniors unintentionally starve their brains of what it needs. Diets high in sugar, processed foods, and trans fats slowly damage blood vessels, inflame tissues, and impair cognitive function. Meanwhile, essential nutrients, omega-3 fatty acids, B vitamins, antioxidants, are often missing. The brain cannot perform at its best when fueled by foods that leave the body sluggish. The fourth mistake is social withdrawal. Loneliness doesn't just affect the heart, it erodes the mind. Isolation, especially in later years, can be as harmful as physical illness. Without regular, meaningful interaction, the brain receives fewer emotional cues, fewer conversations to process, fewer connections to strengthen. It begins to retreat inward. A quick phone call, a walk with a neighbor, a game of cards, these are not luxuries. They're medicine for the brain. The final, and perhaps most silent mistake is underrating sleep. Sleep isn't just rest. It's recovery. During deep sleep, the brain performs its own housekeeping, clearing out waste, repairing connections, consolidating memory. And yet, as people age, many treat sleep as optional. They accept shallow rest as normal. But chronic sleep deprivation accelerates memory loss more than almost anything else. All of these habits may seem small, but together, they form a quiet storm. They chip away at memory not with loud crashes, but with tiny daily whispers. But here's the hopeful part, every single one of these habits is reversible. And soon, we'll explore not just what to avoid, but what to embrace. A single habit. A daily spark. A trick so simple you'll wonder why no one ever told you before. But first, let's understand what science has now revealed about that spark. The concept of the daily mental trigger. Imagine your brain as an orchestra, rows of instruments, all waiting to play. But unless someone lifts the baton and begins the symphony, they remain silent. The strings stay still. The drums do not pulse. The melody never begins. In this metaphor, the daily mental trigger is that baton. A small, deliberate act that signals the brain, asterisk, it's time to wake up. It's time to engage. Let's begin. Asterisk. But what makes something a true mental trigger? It's not just about thinking. It's about directing the mind to think with intention. For a habit to truly spark your brain each day, it must meet 3 conditions. 1. It must require active thought, not passive observation. 2. It must involve personal relevance, forcing you to draw from your own memory, emotion, or decision-making. 3. It must be consistent, becoming part of your daily rhythm, just like brushing your teeth or making your morning tea. Decades of neuroscience have uncovered a powerful truth: the brain is plastic. It molds itself in response to repeated use. The more you walk a mental path, the clearer it becomes. The less you use it, the more it fades into overgrown silence. But unlike the muscles of the body, the mind does not respond well to random bursts of activity. It needs steady rhythm. Predictable triggers. Think of it like watering a plant, a little bit, every day. Miss too many days, and the roots dry out. The daily mental trigger works because it creates a small mental workout that stimulates multiple areas of the brain at once. Memory recall, language, emotional awareness, sequencing, and planning. It's not about straining. It's about activating. So what does this trigger actually look like in real life? It could be a question, a simple prompt, a short, structured moment where your brain is gently forced to do something, to remember, reflect, decide, or narrate. For example, what was the most surprising thing I noticed yesterday? If I could relive one moment from this week, what would it be and why? What small thing made me smile this morning? What did I forget to do yesterday that I'll try to remember today? These aren't just questions. They are mental mirrors. They force the brain to scan memory, form connections, apply emotion, and arrange language, all in a single exercise. They awaken the prefrontal cortex and hippocampus, which are critical for focus and memory. But for the trigger to work, it must be written by hand. Why? Because writing by hand engages more brain regions than typing or speaking. It connects motor skills, visual processing, and neural planning into one action. When you hold a pen and shape letters on paper, you're lighting up parts of your brain that would otherwise remain dormant. You're not just recalling, you're creating. This is not journaling in the traditional sense. You don't need pages of prose. You need a sentence, a reflection, a small note to your brain that says, asterisk, we're still alive. We're still thinking. Keep going. Asterisk. And when done consistently, daily, without pressure, without perfection, this trigger becomes the kindling. It fuels cognition. It builds confidence. And over time, it rewires your brain toward clarity. Many have searched for miracle cures to aging minds. But often, the miracle is not in medicine. It's in the quiet power of one habit. A spark. A sentence. A page. And in the next chapter, we'll explore why the act of handwriting, not typing or speaking, holds the deepest power to awaken your memory, even in your 70s and beyond. In a world overflowing with screens and taps and voice commands, the humble act of holding a pen and forming letters on paper feels almost ancient, obsolete, even. But science tells a different story, a remarkable one. Because what seems old-fashioned, writing by hand, is, in truth, one of the most powerful tools for sharpening a fading memory. To understand why, we need to enter the inner workings of the brain during the act of handwriting. When you pick up a pen and begin to write, your brain lights up in a way that's completely different from typing on a keyboard or speaking aloud. First, the motor cortex springs into action. Your brain calculates fine motor movements to control your fingers. This isn't a repetitive tap of the same keys. This is shaping curves, loops, pressure. It's coordination. It's physical memory. Then the visual cortex joins in, interpreting what you see as you write. You're not only thinking the words, you're seeing them form in real time, absorbing each letter as your own creation. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, responsible for higher-order thinking and organization, becomes deeply involved. To write even a single meaningful sentence by hand requires your brain to plan, sequence, and recall. It's a cognitive puzzle that demands presence. And then there's the hippocampus, the memory center. Studies have shown that handwriting, more than typing or reading, activates this region with heightened intensity. The hippocampus, so vital in the storage of long-term memory, becomes engaged in a deeper, more lasting way when we write our thoughts rather than speak or type them. What does all this mean? It means that when you write something by hand, you're not just thinking. You're sculpting the thought into your nervous system. You're giving it shape, texture, and durability. The memory becomes less like a whisper and more like a carving in stone. But here's the beautiful part. The content doesn't need to be elaborate. This is not about writing novels or essays. It's not about perfect grammar or eloquence. It's about engagement. Writing a single sentence with genuine reflection engages the brain more than 1,000 passive thoughts drifting through your head during the day. Consider this. You sit at your kitchen table each morning, a warm cup of tea nearby. The sun filters softly through the curtain. You open a notebook and see the question you wrote yesterday. What was something I learned about myself yesterday? Your mind searches. You remember a conversation, a quiet emotion, a moment where you responded differently than you once might have. You write a single sentence, maybe two. That's it. But what just happened in those 5 minutes? You recalled a memory. You evaluated its meaning. You translated thought into language. You formed letters through physical coordination. You reinforced identity, insight, and presence. This is no small act. This is a neurological workout disguised as a quiet morning ritual. And when done daily, it begins to stack. Day after day, you engage the same parts of your brain. Like muscles, they respond. They grow. Neural pathways are strengthened. Memory becomes more accessible. Focus improves. You begin to remember more, not just because your brain is younger, but because it is awake. Numerous studies have confirmed this. One experiment found that adults over 65 who engaged in daily expressive writing showed significant improvements in working memory and cognitive flexibility over just 6 weeks. Another study revealed that handwriting activated more robust connectivity between the left and right hemispheres of the brain, a key marker of mental sharpness. And perhaps even more profound, handwriting evokes emotion. There's something deeply human about forming your own letters, your own words. It connects you with your past, with how you learned, how you processed the world before it became digital. It stirs nostalgia, identity, and creativity. Typing is fast. It's efficient. But it's also distant. Handwriting is deliberate, personal, alive. So why does this matter in your 70s? Because memory is not just about facts. It's about presence. And when you sit down each day to write, even for a few minutes, you're telling your brain, I am still here. I am still learning. I am still becoming. This habit, simple as it seems, is not just a trick. It is a form of self-respect. A declaration that the mind is still fertile, still capable, still worthy of effort. And in the next chapter, we'll explore how to build this habit into your day in a way that feels effortless, calming, and enjoyable, so that it becomes not a task, but a cherished part of your life. Habits don't grow from force. They grow from rhythm, from repetition, from meaning. And when it comes to sharpening the mind, the daily handwriting ritual, your mental trigger, must feel less like a chore and more like a quiet invitation. An anchor in your day, rather than a burden. The key is not intensity, but consistency. To build this habit in your 70s or beyond, you must start small. Smaller than you think. Begin not with expectations, but with a space. Choose a physical spot where your mind can feel calm. It could be a kitchen table, a favorite chair by the window, or even the corner of your bed. The place doesn't need to be special. It only needs to be yours. The brain responds to cues, and over time, that spot becomes a signal. This is where I think. This is where I return to myself. Next, prepare your tools. You don't need anything fancy. A simple notebook. A pen that feels good in your hand. You might even choose a small box or shelf to keep them in. Something ceremonial, almost sacred. The ritual matters. Then, set a time. Mornings are ideal for many. The mind is fresh. The world is quiet. But if mornings feel rushed or heavy, choose a gentle time in the evening. Just before bed. Right after tea. What matters most is consistency. The brain loves routine. It begins to anticipate the habit, even long for it. Now comes the simplest part, the prompt. Don't overthink it. You don't need to invent deep questions every day. Choose a short list of reflective prompts and rotate them. What did I enjoy most about yesterday? What am I grateful for today? What confused or surprised me this week? What do I hope to remember tomorrow? Write just 1 to 3 sentences. That's all. You are not journaling for posterity. You are waking your mind. You are engaging memory, emotion, language, and focus, all at once, in a way that feels effortless. And most importantly, remove judgment. Your handwriting doesn't need to be neat. Your answers don't need to be profound. Some days you may write just a word or two. Others, a paragraph may spill out unexpectedly. Let it flow. This is not a performance. It's a pulse check, a heartbeat for your mind. And if you miss a day, no guilt, no catching up. Just return the next day, like you would to an old friend. Memory is patient. What matters is that you return. With time, often just weeks, you may notice subtle shifts. You recall names more easily, find words quicker, reflect deeper. Not because you've become someone new, but because you've reawakened someone still here. Her name is Lastri. She lives in a small town just outside Yogyakarta, where the mornings are quiet and the roosters still call out before sunrise. At 74 years old, Lastri had seen a full life, decades of teaching, raising children, losing loved ones, and finding peace in a slow, steady rhythm. But something had changed in recent years. She began to forget words mid-sentence. Her favorite recipes, once memorized like lullabies, needed to be read again and again. She laughed off the small things, the misplaced glasses, the confusion with dates. But deep down, she was scared. She once stood in the market, staring at a familiar face, unable to recall if it was someone she'd taught, someone who'd visited her home, or someone she'd only seen in dreams. That night, she cried alone. Her daughter noticed. She offered to bring her to doctors. Lastri refused. "I'm just getting old," she said. "This is how it goes." But inside, she mourned the slow disappearance of herself. Then, on her 74th birthday, her grandson, a quiet boy who loved reading, gave her a notebook. It wasn't anything expensive. Just a soft-covered journal with floral patterns and a pen tucked inside. He said, "Write one thing each day, Grandma. One thing you want to remember." She smiled, thanked him, and placed it on a shelf. For a week, it sat untouched. Then one morning, after forgetting where she had left her sandals for the third time, she took it down. She opened to the first blank page. And she wrote, "Today, the sky was soft gray. I saw 3 swallows dance near the guava tree. I want to remember that." That was it. Just one sentence. But something shifted. The next day, she wrote again. Something about the taste of her morning coffee. The next, a childhood song that came back to her in the breeze. Then a memory of her husband's laugh. Then her mother's perfume. Days passed. The notebook began to fill. Her handwriting, shaky at first, began to stabilize. And so did her mind. She began to remember more, not just memories, but groceries, phone numbers, birthdays. She started reading again. And when her neighbors spoke to her, she found herself fully there, listening, responding, connecting. Weeks turned to months. The notebook, now worn and full, was replaced by a second. Then a third. And one afternoon, sitting under the same guava tree she had written about, she said to her daughter, "I thought I was fading. But I was just quiet. I only needed to be asked what I still remembered." Today, Lastri is 76. She still forgets things now and then. But she no longer fears it. Because every morning, before breakfast, she writes. Sometimes it's a memory. Sometimes a prayer. Sometimes just the color of the light on her windowsill. But she knows, with every word, that her mind is alive. That it still holds stories worth remembering. And more importantly, that she is still here. Her story is not rare. All across the world, older adults are discovering that memory is not a fading candle, but a fire that can be fed, gently, daily, with intention. And for many, like Ibu Lastri, it begins not with medicine, but with a pen. The mind doesn't live in isolation. It is not a machine that functions on thought alone. The brain is deeply connected to the body, to blood flow, to breath, to sunlight on the skin. That's why the simple act of writing by hand, while powerful on its own, becomes even more effective when paired with 2 forgotten medicines, movement and fresh air. Let's return to the morning again. Before the writing. Before the notebook is opened. Step outside. It doesn't need to be far. Even just a few steps into your garden, or a slow walk along the porch, is enough. Breathe in deeply. Let your lungs stretch. Let your eyes scan the trees, the sky, the quiet hum of the world waking up. This is not exercise. It is activation. When you move your body, even gently, you pump oxygen-rich blood to your brain. That oxygen nourishes neural tissue, sharpens attention, and clears mental fog. Just 5 to 10 minutes of walking before your writing ritual can dramatically increase mental clarity. Add to that the power of natural light. Exposure to morning sunlight helps regulate your circadian rhythm. That rhythm influences not just sleep, but mood and memory. Sunlight also boosts serotonin, the chemical that makes you feel alert and content, the perfect state in which to reflect and write. Some of the sharpest minds in their 70s and beyond follow a pattern that's surprisingly simple. 1. A few minutes of movement. 2. A few minutes of sunlight. 3. A few minutes of reflection on paper. They call it their morning triangle. It costs nothing. It requires no equipment. And yet, the combination has been described as transformational. When your body is gently awakened by breath and light, your brain follows. And when your brain is active and your hand begins to write, you reinforce the message. I am here. I am still thinking. I am still growing. Asterisk asterisk. So if you're wondering how to take your memory practice to the next level, you don't need more effort. You need nature. You need rhythm. You need to move, breathe, and remember. Sometimes, what you remove is just as powerful as what you add. As you nurture the brain with movement, writing, and reflection, it's equally important to clear away the silent intruders that quietly dull the mind. These habits may seem harmless, even normal, but over time, they create mental clutter, fog, and fatigue. Hashtag 1. Overconsumption of sugar and processed foods. The brain runs on glucose, but not from sugary pastries or sweetened drinks. High-sugar diets spike insulin, inflame the brain, and have been linked to impaired memory and a higher risk of dementia. Processed foods with artificial additives, hydrogenated oils, and chemical preservatives burden the body and fog the mind. Instead, favor whole foods, fruits, leafy greens, nuts, olive oil, fish. Think of food as brain fuel, not just a filler. Hashtag 2. Sitting for too long without mental stimulation. Sitting itself isn't dangerous. But sitting without engagement, hours spent passively absorbing television or scrolling through repetitive content, sends the brain into a passive mode. The longer it stays unstimulated, the harder it becomes to awaken it. Balance stillness with curiosity. If you're sitting, let it be for something that invites thought, a puzzle, a book, a memory exercise, or better yet, your daily writing. Hashtag 3. Neglecting hydration. Dehydration, even in mild forms, affects concentration and memory. Older adults often don't feel thirst the way they used to, which means it's easy to forget. But your brain needs water, plain, clean water, to function clearly. Tea, soup, or infused water can help, but nothing replaces hydration. Hashtag 4. Lack of sleep or fragmented rest. Sleep is not idle time. It's when the brain cleans itself, organizes memories, and processes emotion. Poor or interrupted sleep leaves the mind foggy and forgetful. Honor your bedtime. Create a calming routine. Let your sleep become sacred. Hashtag 5. Negative self-talk. Telling yourself, I'm just getting old, or I can't remember anything anymore, creates mental permission to decline. But the brain listens. And it responds. Instead, shift gently to words like, asterisk, I'm training my mind. Asterisk, my memory is awakening. Asterisk. What you avoid, just like what you embrace, shapes the landscape of your mind. 10 minutes. That's all it takes to begin a quiet revolution inside your mind. Not an hour-long course, not a strict regimen. Just 10 minutes of stillness. 10 minutes with a pen. 10 minutes where the outside world quiets down, and the inside world, your thoughts, your memories, your awareness, rises to the surface. 10 minutes can sound small, but it's the consistency that makes it powerful. Because each day, your brain learns something. Asterisk, we are still learning. We are still remembering. We are still present. Asterisk. Think of these 10 minutes as a gentle clearing of the mental cobwebs. You sit, you breathe, and you write. No pressure. No judgment. Some days, your thoughts may flow easily. Other days, they may feel stubborn. But you still write. You begin with a question. What mattered to me yesterday? What do I want to remember today? What moment made me pause this week? And from that question, your mind does what it was built to do. It searches. It reflects. It connects. This simple act of searching inward, of putting thought to paper by hand, builds bridges in the brain. It strengthens recall, sharpens language, and centers emotion. Over time, it becomes not just a routine, but a sanctuary. 10 minutes. That's it. You can write on lined paper, in a notebook, even on loose scraps. It doesn't have to be perfect. It only has to be yours. Some people write with classical music playing in the background. Others write beside a window or under a tree. There are no rules, only rhythm. And the beauty of this habit is what it gives in return. A clearer memory, a sharper focus, a deeper sense of peace. Not because you tried harder, but because you showed up. Day after day. Quietly. Willingly. Just 10 minutes a day can change not just how you think, but how you feel about your own mind. You are not fading. You are reawakening. And it begins with a pen. Memory is not a machine. It is a garden. Some days it blooms with color, names, faces, songs from decades ago, laughter echoing in full detail. Other days, it feels quiet, overgrown, or forgotten. But even then, beneath the surface, life is still there. Roots still run deep. And with care, they can grow again. The truth is, aging does not strip you of your worth, your wisdom, or your ability to think clearly. It simply asks you to tend to the garden differently. Gently. Intentionally. With patience. The act of writing by hand each day is like watering that garden. 10 minutes. A few words. A memory. A thought. A question. These small acts are like sunlight, like rain. They nourish what still lives in you. They remind your brain, you still matter, and your story is still unfolding. You are not a faded version of who you once were. You are becoming someone even deeper, even wiser, even more awake, not in speed, but in presence. Let the world chase its noise. You don't need to. Because in the quiet of your notebook, each letter you write becomes a seed, a new connection, a new bloom. And as days pass, you'll begin to notice the way your thoughts return faster, the ease with which you recall names, the clarity in your decisions, the joy in remembering, not just facts, but feelings. You are not losing yourself. You are tending to yourself. And in this small, beautiful act of daily writing, you take back something many thought was lost: ownership of your mind. So today, find your pen. Open to a fresh page. Breathe. And begin. Because memory is a garden. And you are still the gardener.